On paper, this flight shouldn't be possible. 19 hours in the air, non-stop, from Singapore to New York. And yet, Singapore Airlines flies it every single day. There's a catch though. To make this flight physically possible, they had to rip out the entire economy cabin, which means not one economy seat exists on this aircraft. Wait, let me explain why that's necessary. To fly further, a plane needs more fuel, and fuel itself weighs a lot. A fully loaded long-haul jet can be carrying well over 100 tons of it, so the extra fuel you add needs yet more fuel just to carry it. This is the A350-900 ULR, ultra long range, Airbus's fuel system reworked to hold about 17% more fuel than the standard version without adding a single new tank. On the route to New York, the plane uses close to 85% of its total range, and it's certified to fly over 6 hours from the nearest emergency airport if an engine fails over open ocean. That fuel margin is also why economy disappeared entirely. This version carries over a third fewer people than Singapore Airlines' standard version of the same aircraft, just 67 business class seats and 94 premium economy, nothing else. Every extra pound, every extra seat, eats directly into a fuel budget this flight barely has to spare. This isn't even the first attempt. Singapore Airlines flew this exact route to Newark from 2004 to 2013 on a different aircraft, the 4-engine A340-500, until rising fuel prices made the math impossible. It burned almost 40% more fuel than the aircraft that replaced it. The route got canceled outright. For 5 years, nobody flew non-stop between Singapore and New York, until the ULR arrived in 2018 and the numbers finally worked again. First back to Newark, and later to JFK as well, once demand justified splitting the service. Even now, the flight doesn't take the shortest path. The direct route would cross the Arctic and Russian airspace, closed since 2022, so eastbound and westbound flights now loop around the world in completely different directions, sometimes choosing a longer path on purpose because favorable winds burn less fuel overall than a shorter one flown against them. It's the same reason long flights curve the way they do on a map instead of flying straight, something we've actually covered in a whole separate video, if you're curious exactly why. The aircraft was the easier problem to solve. The human body has turned out to be harder. Sit still at altitude for the better part of a day, and your body starts protesting in specific, measurable ways. Cabin air holds a fraction of the humidity you'd normally breathe, so dehydration sets in faster than it would on the ground. Blood oxygen saturation drops slightly at typical cabin pressure, which is part of why everyone feels a little foggier by hour 15 than they did at hour 1. And your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells your body when to be alert and when to sleep, has no idea it just crossed 12 time zones in a single sitting. Airlines have started treating all of this as an engineering problem rather than a comfort one. Cabin lighting on ultra-long-haul aircraft increasingly shifts through program cycles timed to the destination, not the one you left. Food is trickier than it sounds. Cabin pressure and low humidity dull your sense of taste and smell by as much as 30%, which is part of why airline food has traditionally leaned so heavily salted, to compensate for taste buds that don't work properly at altitude. But that much sodium over 19 hours makes dehydration and bloating worse, not better. Singapore Airlines partnered with Golden Door, an exclusive California wellness retreat where a single week normally costs over $10,000, to design a menu built around hydration and lean proteins instead, with meals timed specifically to ease passengers toward their destination time zone rather than the one they left. Multiple flight crews rotate through a flight this long, resting in bunks hidden inside a crown-shaped compartment built into the ceiling. Most passengers never even notice the door. Qantas, which is building its own even longer non-stop flights for the years ahead, ran research flights in 2019 to study exactly how badly this kind of fatigue actually affects people. Pilots wore EEG headsets for the full 19+ hours, recording brain activity in real time, while researchers from Monash University tracked melatonin levels through urine samples taken before, during, and after each flight. What came back wasn't what anyone expected. Pilot alertness didn't decline in a smooth, predictable line. It dropped in waves tied to meal timing and workload. A pilot could report feeling completely fine at hour 14, while the readings underneath told researchers something very different was happening in his brain. All of this raises an obvious question. Why bother at all? Removing an entire cabin class and running an aircraft close to its absolute range limit is expensive by any reasonable measure. But airlines aren't doing this for the passenger chasing the cheapest possible fare. They're doing it for the ones who'll pay a real premium to avoid a layover entirely. And there are more of those people than you might expect. Business travelers consistently pay more for a direct flight than a connecting one, even on routes where the connection barely adds any time at all. On a flight this long, skipping a single stopover can save the better part of a day, and for someone whose employer is footing the bill, that time is worth real money. Qantas has already proven the pricing works on its own ultra-long-haul route between Perth and London, where passengers pay around 20% more than the one-stop alternative just to fly straight through. Singapore Airlines is doubling down on the same bet. Starting in 2027, its ULR fleet gets retrofitted again. Fewer seats overall, but adding a first-class cabin for the first time, and shrinking premium economy further to make room. Fewer seats, again, in exchange for higher fares on the ones that remain. This math doesn't apply the same way to cargo, which is worth sitting with for a second, because it shows how differently the same physics problem gets solved when the passenger isn't a person. UPS runs its main cargo hub, Worldport, out of Louisville, and its Boeing 747-8 freighters can carry a maximum payload of around 148 tons. But loaded that heavy, the aircraft's range drops from over 8,000 nautical miles down to roughly 4,100. Louisville to Hong Kong is more than 7,000 miles. Flying it non-stop, fully loaded, simply isn't possible. So UPS routes through Anchorage instead, refueling and swapping crews there before continuing on. A box doesn't care how long the trip takes. A business traveler paying full fare, and the company covering his invoice, very much does. That difference in patience is what shapes billions of dollars in how airlines and freight carriers design their entire networks. Right now, 19 hours sits close to the practical ceiling of what a passenger aircraft can do nonstop. Geometrically, fly more than half of Earth's circumference in one direction, and the destination is technically closer from the other way. But in the real world, wind decides more than geometry does, which is exactly why these flights already curve around the globe chasing favorable jet streams rather than taking the straight line. Either way, Singapore to New York already uses the vast majority of its aircraft's total range. There isn't much runway left to push this further with anything flying today. And that fragility isn't just theoretical. In early 2026, conflict disrupting the Strait of Hormuz sent jet fuel prices up nearly 70%, pushing the industry's total fuel bill up by tens of billions of dollars and roughly cutting global airline profit projections in half. Qantas and Virgin Australia both cut capacity within weeks. It's the same vulnerability that killed Singapore's first attempt at this exact flight back in 2013, just playing out again on a global scale. And it isn't distributed evenly. Airlines from countries still permitted to fly over Russia get a real advantage in fuel and time that everyone else now has to route around. Except one airline is building for this anyway. Qantas beat out Boeing's yet-to-be-certified 777-8 and chose a modified Airbus A350 for the job instead, 12 of them on order, the first one named Vega, after a star. That's a small nod to the airline's own history. In 1943, with the usual route to Britain cut off by war, Qantas flew stripped-down flying boats from Perth to Ceylon, navigating by starlight across nearly 3,500 miles of open ocean. Crews called it the double sunrise because the flight was long enough to watch the sunrise twice. 80 years later, Qantas is chasing something similar on purpose. The new aircraft is meant to fly Sydney to London and eventually Sydney to New York in up to 22 hours, nearly a full day in the air. The project has already been delayed more than once, and it isn't expected to carry passengers until October 2027. When it finally does, it will make today's record holder look almost conservative by comparison. Every time the fuel weight paradox looks like a hard stop, someone builds an aircraft that moves the line a little further out. 19 hours was supposed to be close to the limit too, right up until it wasn't.